I told my daughter she was being dramatic. Those were my exact words. "You're being dramatic, sweetheart. Your brother made a mistake. People make mistakes." She looked at me for a long moment, the kind of look where you can see someone deciding something behind their eyes. And then she said, "Okay, Dad," and she walked out. That was 4 years ago. She hasn't been back since. I used to tell myself I was a good father. Honestly, I still catch myself doing it sometimes. Some old reflex that kicks in before I can stop it. I coached Little League. I showed up to every school play. I worked doubles at the plant for 3 straight years so we could keep the house in Dayton after my wife got sick. Good fathers do those things, right? That's what I told myself. That's what I kept telling myself even when the evidence started stacking up. That maybe I had been good at the surface things and terrible at the ones that actually mattered. My son's name is Warren. He's 34 now. My daughter is 13. Her name is Lena. What Warren did, I'm not going to dance around it, because I've spent 4 years watching myself try to soften it in my own head and it hasn't helped anyone, is he went after Lena's husband. Not physically. Worse, he spent 8 months getting close to Lena's husband, befriending him, showing up at their house for dinners, borrowing his tools, texting him about football. 8 months of that. And the whole time, he was also siphoning money out of the small business Lena and her husband had built together, a tile and flooring company they'd started 3 years before in Columbus, $46,000 over 8 months. He'd been added to a shared account to help with invoicing when her husband had surgery on his hand and couldn't type. Warren just kept using it. A little here, a little there, some months nothing. Then a big pull, classic slow bleed. Lena found out because a vendor called about a past due payment that should have been covered twice as over. She pulled the statements herself. She called me before she called the police. I should have told her to call the police. Instead, I drove to Columbus the same night, sat at her kitchen table with my son, and spent 4 hours convincing her that involving law enforcement would destroy the family. I told her Warren was struggling, which was true. He'd been between jobs. He'd had some debt. He'd gone through a rough patch after his girlfriend left. I told her those things like they were explanations. I talked about how our mother had died when Warren was 12, and how that hit him different than it hit Lena. Because Lena was older and more resilient, and Warren had always needed more scaffolding. I said the word scaffolding. I remember because Lena looked at me like I'd said something in a foreign language. She said, "Dad, he stole from us." I said he's going to pay it back. She said how? I didn't have an answer for that. Warren sat across from her and cried and said he was sorry and that he'd make it right, and I put my hand on his shoulder like he was the one who needed comforting in that room. Looking back, I can see exactly what I did. I walked into my daughter's house. The house she and her husband had bought with money they earned. The business they'd built from nothing, their life. And I sat down at their table and I ran a 4-hour negotiation, where the entire goal was to protect my son from consequences. And I dressed it up in family language and grief language. And we can get through this together language, until Lena was too exhausted to fight anymore. She agreed not to go to the police. Warren signed a repayment agreement that my son-in-law drew up, $500 a month until the $46,000 was paid back. He made 3 payments. I got a call from Lena 6 months later. She was calm on the phone, which I should have recognized as a warning sign. When Lena gets quiet and calm, she's not okay. She's just decided something. She told me the payments had stopped, that she'd reached out to Warren and he'd stopped responding. That her husband was talking to an attorney about whether they could still pursue the case criminally. I told her to give it more time. She said, "I gave it 6 months, Dad. You told me to give it a chance, and I did, and now he's ghosting me." I said, "Let me talk to him." She said, "You've been talking to him. That's not working." I didn't have anything to say to that, so I filled the silence with the worst thing I could have said, which was, "I just think that pressing charges against your own brother is you can't take back once you do that, it's done." There was a long pause. She said, "Okay, Dad," same words as before, same tone. And then she said one more thing. Just before she hung up, "I need you to understand that I love you. But I don't think you've ever actually been on my side." I told my wife that night that Lena was being dramatic. My wife looked at me from across the bedroom and said, "I don't think she is." I didn't sleep well that night. I told myself it was because of stress. Warren and I have a good relationship. That's the thing I need you to understand if you're going to understand any of this. He's funny. He's the kind of person who remembers your coffee order, and texts you stupid memes, and shows up with a 6-pack when you've had a bad week. We have the kind of easy rapport that I never quite figured out how to build with Lena. With Lena, there was always a seriousness. A standard she held things to. I used to think of it as stubbornness. I understand now that it was integrity, and I mistook it for a personality flaw for 30 years. Warren and I watched football together, every Sunday when he was a teenager. Lena was in the school orchestra, and I went to maybe half her concerts. And I always felt slightly out of place at them. slightly unsure what I was supposed to be feeling. When she played the viola, which is not the sexiest instrument. And she knew it and played it anyway. I'd watch her face go still and serious in a way that made me feel like I was seeing something, right? Like she was in a room I didn't have access to. I didn't try very hard to get access to it. Lena graduated valedictorian. I made a joke about how she got her mother's brains. Warren failed sophomore year and had to repeat. And I spent that summer doing practice tests with him at the kitchen table, every night after dinner. I was more present for Warren's failure than I was for Lena's success. I don't think I noticed that for a very long time. She put herself through college. Business degree from Ohio State, which she paid for herself with scholarships, and a part-time job at a restaurant, and one small loan that she paid off in 2 years. I helped Warren with tuition. Not a lot. We didn't have a lot, but I co-signed a loan and helped with his first apartment, and floated him a few hundred here and there when he asked. Which was, often. Lena never asked. I think I told myself that was because she didn't need to. Now I think it might have been because she already knew what the answer would be. After that phone call, the one where she said she didn't think I'd ever been on her side, I didn't hear from Lena for 3 weeks. Then she sent me a text on a Sunday morning. It said, "I've retained an attorney. Warren is being served this week. I wanted to tell you before it happened, so you heard it from me." I called her, immediately. She didn't pick up. I drove to Columbus. She wasn't home, or she was home and didn't answer the door. Which now that I think about it is probably what happened. I called Warren. He was upset. Not upset in the way you're upset when you've done something wrong, and it's catching up with you. Upset in the way he'd always gotten upset when things didn't go how he wanted. This particular flavor of aggrieved that I had spent his entire life helping him manage, rather than addressing. I told him I was sorry. I told him Lena had made her choice, and there wasn't much we could do now. I told him we'd figure it out. I was still managing him, even then. The case moved through civil court over the next several months. Warren didn't contest it. He couldn't. Lena had all the bank records. The judgment came back in her favor. $46,000 plus interest plus attorney's fees. Warren didn't have it. He's still paying it off on a wage garnishment. Will be for years. Lena didn't come to Thanksgiving that year. My wife made the turkey. And Warren came and we sat around that table. And the empty chair where Lena usually sat was the loudest thing in the room. Warren made a joke about it early in the meal. And I laughed because I didn't know what else to do, and my wife looked at me with an expression I will not forget for the rest of my life. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me. Christmas, same thing. Lena sent a card. No return address. Inside it said, "Wishing you health and peace. Lena and Mick." That was it. Mick is her husband's name. He had every right to never speak to us again, and he still signed the card. My wife cried when she read it. I didn't. I put it on the refrigerator, and I looked at it every day for 6 weeks, and I told myself this would eventually resolve itself. The second year was when I started to really understand what I had done. My wife was the one who said it first. She'd been saying versions of it for a while, but I hadn't been hearing her. And then one night in February she sat down across from me at the kitchen table. Same table I'd sat at 4 years ago, telling Lena to let it go. And she said, "I think we lost her. I think we actually lost her." I said, "She'll come around." She said, "Why would she? Give me one reason she should." I couldn't. She said, "You sat at her table, and you told her that protecting your son from consequences was more important than what he did to her. And then when she gave him the chance you asked for, and he did it again, you told her to wait more. And when she finally stopped waiting, you showed up at her house unannounced. And then you laughed at Thanksgiving. When Warren made a joke about her being gone. Her voice was steady. She wasn't yelling. She was just saying it. I didn't stop you. I should have. I don't know why I didn't stop you. But I'm saying it now. We didn't lose her. We gave her away." I sat there for a while, then I said, "I didn't mean to." She said, "I know. But she doesn't know that. And more importantly, it doesn't change what happened." I called Lena the next day. She picked up, which surprised me. I had a whole speech prepared, and the moment I heard her voice I forgot most of it. I told her I was sorry. I said it without qualifications, which was harder than I expected. I kept wanting to add but, and I was just trying to, and I made myself not. I just said I was sorry for not being on her side. I was sorry I let Warren off the hook so many times. I was sorry I laughed at the table on Thanksgiving. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I appreciate that, Dad, I really do. I waited for something else." She said, "I need you to know that I'm not in a place where I can just come back to Sunday dinners and holidays. I'm not punishing you. It's not about punishment. It's just that I built a wall because I had to, and I can't take it down right now because I'm still not sure it's safe to. I hope eventually it will be, but I can't promise you that." I said, "I understand." I didn't, fully, but I was trying to. She said, "How's Mom?" We talked for 40 minutes. About nothing important. My wife's garden, a show Lena was watching. The fact that her dog had eaten an entire stick of butter off the counter and had been extremely unwell about it. 40 minutes of ordinary conversation. And I was so grateful for it that I had to sit in my truck for 10 minutes afterward. Because I didn't trust myself to drive. What I want to tell you, what I've been working up to this whole time, is about Warren. Not about what he did. You already know what he did. I want to tell you about the pattern. Because the pattern is the thing I missed for 34 years. And I think it's the most important part of this story. Warren has always taken things. Not always in ways that were obvious. Sometimes it was credit. A project at work that someone else had done most of the labor on. A story about something that happened. That he'd made himself the center of. Sometimes it was emotional. Monopolizing conversations. Always needing to be the one going through the most. Calling at midnight with a crisis when you had to be up at 6. The theft from Lena wasn't a departure from his character. It was his character, finally big enough to be undeniable. And I had enabled that character my entire adult life. Not intentionally. That's what I keep coming back to. The not intentionally part, because I think it matters, and I also think it doesn't matter at all. Intent doesn't change outcomes. I thought I was helping Warren. I thought I was compensating for the fact that things were harder for him, that he'd needed more, that the world was less kind to him. I told myself the help I gave him was just being a father. I didn't understand that I was training him to believe he could take without consequences. And someone would always be there to smooth it over. I didn't understand that the person paying the price for that training wasn't going to be me. It was going to be Lena. She was the one who grew up, watching her brother get bailed out, and learning that she had to earn everything herself. She was the one who built something real and watched her brother dismantle pieces of it. She was the one sitting across a kitchen table, being told by her own father to have a little more grace. And I had the nerve to think she was the one being dramatic. It's been 4 years now. The contacts between Lena and me are still careful. We talk on the phone more than we used to, maybe once every 3 weeks. She sends me pictures sometimes. A few months ago she sent a photo of her and Mick at a place called the Outer Banks. They were on a pier, sun behind them, both squinting into it and grinning. I put it on the refrigerator next to the Christmas card. My wife cried again when she saw the photo go up on the refrigerator. Happy crying this time, I think. Warren found out about the photo. I don't know how. He called me a few days later and said he thought it was unfair that Lena got to just move on and act like nothing happened. I asked him what he meant by that. He said she'd gone to court, she'd gotten her judgment, and now she was punishing him by continuing to freeze him out of the family. I said, Warren, she went to court because you stole $46,000 from her, and then stopped responding to her texts. There was a pause. He said, I know what I did. I said, then I don't understand what you're asking me for. He said, I was taking her side. I said, yeah, I am. I should have done it 4 years ago. He didn't talk to me for about 6 weeks after that. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. It did. Warren is still my son, and I still love him, and the weeks he went quiet were long and strange. And I missed him in a way that I'm a little ashamed of given everything. But I also didn't call to apologize. I waited, and eventually he called back, because Warren has always needed something. And whatever he needed, he knew I was still the most likely source of it. We have a different relationship now. I still love him. I no longer manage him. Those two things are harder to hold together than I would have guessed, but I'm working on it. Last spring, Lena called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Which was unusual enough that I answered on the first ring. She said, I want to tell you something before you hear it from someone else. I braced myself. She said, I'm pregnant. I didn't say anything for a moment. She said, Dad? I said, I'm here. I'm here. I'm just, and I had to stop because something was happening in my chest that I hadn't been prepared for. Some kind of collapse of feeling that I can't quite describe, and I sat down on the back porch steps and looked at the yard and just breathed for a second. I said, that's the best news I've gotten in a long time. She laughed, which is the sound I have been trying to earn back for 4 years. She said, we're not telling everyone yet. Just a few people. I wanted you to know. I said, thank you for telling me. She said, I need to say this. I'm not making any promises about how things will look going forward. You and Mom, and what that looks like with the baby, I don't know yet. I want it to work. I'm just being honest that I don't know what it looks like yet. I said, that's fair. That's more than fair. She said, I just didn't want you to find out from Warren. Which told me a lot about where she is. About what she still needs to be careful about. About the fact that the wall is coming down slowly. Brick by brick, and some of those bricks are still mortared in pretty good, and that's not her fault. My wife and I don't talk about this as often as we used to. Some things you say everything there is to say about, and then you just live inside what's left. But a few weeks ago she asked me what I had learned from all of it. Not in a punishing way. Genuinely curious. She wanted to know if I had actually landed somewhere. Or if I was still processing. I thought about it for a while. I said, I think I learned that protecting someone from consequences isn't the same thing as loving them. And I think I spent a long time confusing the two. She nodded, I said, and I think I learned that the person in the room who doesn't need anything from you is usually the one you should be paying more attention to. Because the fact that they don't ask doesn't mean they don't need. She said, you should tell Lena that. Maybe. Maybe not in those words. Lena doesn't need my insights delivered to her in a speech. She figured all of this out herself. Years before I did. And she did it without any help from me. What she might need, what I hope she might one day feel, is that the version of me that shows up now is different from the one who sat at her kitchen table and negotiated on her brother's behalf. That I'm not going to laugh at an empty chair. That if someone takes from her, I will be on her side. I'm going to be a grandfather this fall. I don't know what that will look like exactly. I don't know if I'll be in the room, or nearby, or across the state waiting for a text. I'm not taking any of it for granted. Whatever Lena decides to give me access to, I will show up for completely. Without asking for more than she's ready to give. That's new for me, showing up for what's offered instead of campaigning for more. It doesn't come naturally. But I'm practicing. I have a photo on my refrigerator of my daughter squinting into the sun on a pier in the Outer Banks. Grinning like she doesn't have a single thing to worry about. I look at it every morning. That's enough.